I am Gabriel Hayes, 70 years old, and I am a retired engineer. My son Matt and his wife Nicole recently found their dream home, a $600,000 mansion. Then they handed me the mortgage application with my name already on it. "You've saved enough, Gabe," Nicole said. "It's time to help your family." I looked at my only son, the boy I raised, and I said no. They sued me. They sued me for the full $600,000, claiming I was mentally incompetent and a danger to myself. But when we got to court, the judge looked past their lies, looked right at me, and asked one simple question that unraveled their entire world. Before I tell you what that question was and what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Let me know in the comments. And please hit like and subscribe if you believe that family should be about respect, not just about what you can get. The spring in the filter basket of my coffee maker had finally given up. It was an old machine, a reliable workhorse that Alice, my late wife, used to curse at every morning. But it made good, strong coffee, and at 70 years old, I find more comfort in repairing old things than learning new ones. I was twisting a piece of 18-gauge wire into a makeshift coil when the back door flew open. No knock. In my house, only one person does that anymore. "We're here." Nicole's voice sharp and too loud for a Tuesday morning. She swept into my small Oregon kitchen, all perfume and bright colors, followed by my son Matt. She was holding a bottle of wine, a fancy French name I couldn't pronounce, wrapped in a gold bow. "A little something for you, Gabe," she chirped, setting it on my Formica countertop. I stared at the bottle. $80 easy. "You know I don't drink, Nicole." "Oh, silly me." She laughed, a high, brittle sound that always set my teeth on edge. "I forgot. Alice was the wine drinker, wasn't she?" "Oh well, you can save it for guests." Guests, as if I had any. Since Alice passed 5 years ago, this house had been quiet. Nicole knew that. This wasn't a gift. It was a power move. A reminder that she didn't know me and didn't care to. It was a way of saying, the old queen is dead, I'm the new one. Matt, my son, 42 years old, and looking 50, finally spoke. He always looked stressed, like a man drowning slowly, and his eyes darted around the kitchen. "How's the coffee maker, Dad?" "It'll live," I grunted, focusing on the wire. I didn't want to look at them. Their visits were never just visits. They were campaigns. "That's good," Nicole chimed in, moving between me and my workbench, physically blocking my view. "Because we have amazing news, life-changing news." I put my pliers down. I knew this tone. Life-changing was Nicole speak for expensive, and amazing meant she wanted something. "We found it, Gabe," she said, her eyes wide with a fake theatrical joy. "The perfect house." I waited. I'm an engineer by trade. I don't jump to conclusions. I wait for the data. I've spent my life analyzing stress points, weak joints, and faulty designs. And my daughter-in-law Nicole was the most poorly designed system I'd ever encountered. All flash, no foundation. "It's up on Claremont Hill," she gushed, pulling out her phone to show me pictures. 4 bedrooms, a 3-car garage, there's even a little guest cottage out back. It's us. "Sounds expensive," I said, wiping grease from my hands onto a rag. "It's an investment, Dad." Matt corrected me quickly, stepping forward. "It's what we've always talked about. A place for the grandkids. Eventually." I looked at them. Married 10 years, no grandkids. Just a lot of talk about building their brand and living their best life. Their best life always seemed to be funded by credit cards I suspected they were drowning in. "Well, son, congratulations." I turned back to my coffee maker. The conversation, as far as I was concerned, was over. "Ah," Nicole said, her voice like ice water. "That's the other part of the news." She stepped forward, blocking my light completely. From her designer handbag, a thing that probably cost more than my monthly pension check, she pulled out a thick, professionally bound document. She slid it across my kitchen table, scattering the tiny screws from my coffee maker. "We need you to sign this." she said, her smile bright and hard. I sighed. I picked up the document. It was heavy. I pulled my reading glasses from my shirt pocket, wiped a smudge off the lens, and put them on. I expected a cosigner application. I expected a request for a loan, a gift, something I could politely refuse. What I saw stopped my heart. It wasn't a cosigner form. It was a full mortgage application. $600,000. $600,000. My house, this house was paid off. I hadn't had a mortgage in 30 years. I lived on my pension and my 401k withdrawals. It was enough. It was comfortable. But it wasn't $600,000 comfortable. I flipped the page. My grease-stained fingers paused over the applicant fields. My blood went cold. It wasn't Matt's name. It wasn't Nicole's. It was mine. Gabriel Hayes, typed neatly in the box labeled Primary Borrower. I took my glasses off. I rubbed the bridge of my nose hard. I put them back on. The name was still there. They weren't asking me to help them buy a house. They were asking me to buy it for them. The kitchen. My kitchen suddenly felt small and hot. The ticking of the clock on the wall, the one Alice bought at a flea market 30 years ago, suddenly sounded like a bah. Tick, tock. I looked up. I don't understand. My voice came out flat. Dangerous. Matt started pacing that nervous shuffle he does when he's cornered. Dad, it's just a formality. The bank, they like your credit profile better. You're stable, retired. You have the 401k, the pension. Your house is paid off. Nicole cut him off. Her sweet, chirpy voice was gone, replaced by the voice of a CEO in a hostile takeover. Gabe, let's be adults here. She sat down at my table, leaning forward, all business. You're 70. You're set. Alice, bless her heart, is gone. You live alone in this big house. I looked around my 2-bedroom, 1.5-bath, 1,500 square foot cottage. It was hardly a mansion. It was just home. You've saved enough, she continued, her voice like sharp little pebbles. You worked your whole life. What's the point of all that saving if you don't use it? It's time to help your family. It's time for you to invest in us. Invest. There was that word again. Alice and I had invested. We invested 45 years in this community. We invested in raising the boy who was now avoiding my gaze. We invested by living below our means, not beyond them. I looked at the paperwork again. $600,000. A 30-year loan. I'd be 100 years old when it was paid off. They weren't asking for an investment. They were asking for my entire financial future. They were asking for my security, my peace of mind, the nest egg Alice and I had painstakingly built so that I would never be a burden on him. And the irony was so thick I could barely breathe. I didn't look at Nicole. I looked at my son. Matt, look at me. He stopped his nervous pacing. Slowly, his eyes. Alice's eyes lifted from the cracked linoleum floor. They were filled with a desperate, pleading weakness I recognized. It was the same look he had when he was 10 and broke Mrs. Henderson's window. It was the same look he had when he was 20 and wrecked my truck. It was the look of a boy who knew he was wrong but was hoping someone else would fix it. Did you read this? I tapped the document. Nicole thinks. I am not asking what Nicole thinks, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. I am asking what you think. You are 42 years old, Matt. Do you think this is acceptable to bring this here to ask your 70-year-old father to sign away his security for a house you can't afford? It's not like that, Dad, he protested, but his voice was weak. She just really wants this house. You don't know how important this is to her. And there it was. The final terrible truth. My son was gone. The boy I raised, the man I thought I knew, had been replaced by this puppet. He was prioritizing his wife's wants over his father's life. He was willing to sacrifice me, his 70-year-old father, on the altar of his wife's ambition. I folded the document neatly in half. The sound was crisp, final, like a judge's gavel. I slid it back across the table. It stopped right in front of Nicole. No. The word hung in the air. The faucet was still dripping. Drip, drip. Nicole's perfectly made-up face went through 3 distinct phases in less than 2 seconds. First, confusion, as if the word no was a foreign language she didn't understand. Second, offense, as if I had slapped her. Third, a cold, hard rage that made her eyes look like chips of ice. "What?" she whispered, her voice tight. I said. I enunciated every syllable, no. Matt looked like he was going to be sick. "Dad, please, you can't just say no. We already put down a deposit. We told the realtor you were on board." A deposit. With what money? My money, the money I suspected they'd been subtly bleeding from me for years. "Then you'd better call that realtor," I said, turning my back on them. I walked to the sink. "You'd better call him and tell him you lied. If Nicole wants that house," I said, my voice muffled by the sound of running water as I rinsed my coffee mug, "then you two can figure out how to buy it." "You selfish old man!" Nicole shrieked. The civility was gone. I turned around slowly, drying my hands. "Get out of my house." "What?" I said. "Get out." Matt, finally finding a spine, grabbed his wife's arm. "Nicole, come on, we're leaving." "No." She yanked her arm free. She pointed a finger at me, her hand shaking. "You are just sitting on all that money Alice left. You're letting it rot. We are your family." "A family doesn't ask its father to sign his financial death warrant," I said, walking toward them. Nicole snatched the mortgage papers off the table. "You will regret this, Gabe. I promise you, this isn't over." "I'm sure it's not," I said, holding the back door open for them. They stormed out. The screen door slammed shut behind them, the frame rattling in protest. I heard their car engine roar to life, tires spinning on the gravel of my driveway as they peeled out. I stood there listening until the sound faded. I went back to the counter. The $80 bottle of wine was still there. I picked it up and walked to the back porch, uncorked it, and poured every last drop onto Alice's dying rose bushes. I sat down on the old porch swing. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from adrenaline. Nicole was right about one thing. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. I stood on that back porch for a long time. I stood there long after their car squealed out of my driveway, leaving a black mark on the gravel and a cloud of dust in the air. I listened to the sound of their engine fading, taking the last bit of my family's peace with it. I looked at the $80 bottle of wine Nicole had left on my counter. I picked it up, walked back outside, and poured every last drop onto the patch of weeds by the porch steps. The next 2 days were quiet. Too quiet. The silence in the house was heavy, suffocating. I called Matt's phone on Wednesday afternoon. It went straight to voicemail. "Son?" I said, my voice sounding rough. "It's your father. We need to talk." I hung up. He didn't call back. I called again on Thursday, straight to voicemail. This time I didn't leave a message. I am a 70-year-old man. I have earned many things in my life. I will not beg my own son to speak to me. Part of me, the father part, tried to find an excuse. He's embarrassed, I told myself. He's ashamed. He's at home getting an earful from that harpy he married. I told myself they just needed time to cool off. They needed to realize how insane, how disrespectful their proposition had been. I tried to believe that the son I raised, the boy I taught to ride a bike and bait a hook, would eventually remember who he was. I tried to believe that blood was thicker than Nicole's ambition. I was wrong. The proof arrived on Friday. I walked down my long gravel driveway, the Oregon air crisp and damp. My joints always ache in this weather. The mailbox door creaked open. Junk mail, an ad for gutter cleaning, the local paper, and one thin envelope that didn't belong. It was from Bank of America. My heart tightened. I hadn't banked with B of A in 30 years, not since Alice and I opened our joint account at the local credit union. I tore it open right there at the end of my driveway. My eyes scanned the page. It was a form letter. Cold, impersonal corporate. Dear Gabriel Hayes, we regret to inform you that we cannot approve your application at this time. Application. I hadn't applied for anything. I read further down. Your recent application for a $20,000 home equity line of credit. My hand started to shake. $20,000. Has been declined due to recent suspicious activity on your credit profile and insufficient income verification. I read the letter again and again. A line of credit. Against my house. The house I paid off in 1997. The house they just tried to get me to buy for them. It wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a mistake. This was Plan B, that cooling off period I'd imagined. It wasn't cooling off, it was rearming. The rage from Tuesday, the cold, analytical anger I felt when I saw my name on that mortgage, it came flooding back 10 times stronger. This wasn't just pressure. This wasn't just a disrespectful ask. This was fraud. This was theft. They hadn't just stormed out of my kitchen defeated. They had gone straight home, logged onto a computer, and tried to steal from me. They tried to leverage the equity in my house behind my back to get the money they wanted. And the only reason it failed was because I was an old man living on a fixed pension. Insufficient income verification. They had tried to get the loan using my identity, but without my real financial information. I crumpled the letter in my fist. The silence of the past 3 days hadn't been shame. It had been calculation. I stood there by my mailbox, the empty road stretching out in front of me. I finally understood. I wasn't dealing with a spoiled son and his greedy wife. I was dealing with criminals, and they had already made their next move. It was time for me to make mine. I turned around, marched back up the driveway, and went straight to my phone. I wasn't calling Matt. I was calling my bank's fraud department, and I was going to find out exactly what they had done. I didn't even go back inside the house. I stood right there on the gravel driveway, the damp Oregon air chilling my hands, and I dialed the 1-800 number on the letter with a thumb that was shaking not from cold, but from a cold, hard rage. The phone clicked. A robotic voice answered. Thank you for calling Bank of America's Fraud Protection Department. I hate these automated menus. They're designed to make you give up. I punched 0 over and over until a human finally picked up. Fraud Department, this is Susan. How can I help you? Her voice was bored. She'd probably taken 100 calls like this today. My name is Gabriel Hayes, I said, my voice steady, deceptively steady. I'm holding a rejection letter for a $20,000 line of credit that I never applied for. Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that, sir. Her voice clicked into a professional script. That must be very upsetting. Let me pull up your file. Can you please confirm your social security number? I recited the 9 digits, the 9 numbers that define your entire life in this country. I felt dirty saying them out loud. It felt like a violation. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. One moment. I heard her typing. The silence on the line stretched, filled only by the sound of my own blood roaring in my ears. Okay, she said, her tone suddenly more alert. Yes, I see the application here. It was submitted online at 7:42 p.m. this past Tuesday. Tuesday. The very same day they had stormed out of my kitchen. They hadn't even waited 24 hours. They must have driven straight from my house, furious and rejected, and immediately logged on to try and steal from me. The audacity of it, the speed of it, took my breath away. "Mr. Hayes," Susan said, pulling me back. "I'm here," I said, my voice like gravel. "I want to know what information was used to submit this application." "Sir, I can't." "Susan," I interrupted, but I kept my voice calm. "I am the victim of identity theft. I need to know how compromised I am. Tell me what they used." She hesitated. "I understand. I'm noting the account for fraud." "Okay. The application was submitted using your correct full name, Gabriel Elias Hayes, your correct date of birth, and the correct social security number." "Of course. But that wasn't enough. There are always security questions." "What else?" I pressed. "What did they use for verification security questions? Mother's maiden name." There was another pause. More typing. "Yes, sir. The applicant did correctly provide your mother's maiden name." I closed my eyes. The world went silent. The wind in the pine trees. The distant hum of the highway. It all faded. Mother's maiden name. I hung up the phone. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say thank you. I just let my arm drop to my side. I'm an engineer. I'm a man of systems of logic. I shred my bank statements. I burn my old tax returns. My 401k documents are in a fireproof safe in my closet. I am not a careless man. You don't find a man's mother's maiden name on a piece of junk mail. It's not on a utility bill. It's not something you just find while rummaging through a desk. It's something you know. And I knew with a certainty that settled in my gut, like cold lead, that only one person on this earth besides me knew that name. Matt. I remembered it. Not 3 years ago, but 5. Right after Alice died. I was a ghost. I walked through this house, but I wasn't here. The grief was a fog I couldn't see through. Matt had offered to help with the paperwork, the life insurance, the taxes. He sat right there at my kitchen table. This kitchen table. "Dad, this form, this insurance claim, it needs your mother's maiden name." I was so lost, so broken, I didn't even think. I just told him. "Kovacs, Anna Kovacs. Her family was Hungarian." He had nodded, written it down. "Got it, Dad. Don't worry. I'll handle all this." He handled it. He took that piece of my history, that piece of my trust given to him in my darkest moment, and he saved it. He saved it for 5 years. He saved it like a weapon. He held on to that key, that secret, just waiting for the day he could use it to rob me. This wasn't an impulsive act of anger on Tuesday night. This was premeditated. He had been planning this. Or at least he had been holding the tools to do it just in case. This was a different kind of evil. My son, the boy I raised, was a stranger. A cold, calculating stranger who had been waiting for his opportunity. I looked at my house, my home. Suddenly it didn't feel safe. I thought about Tuesday, Nicole's bag, Matt's nervous energy. I walked to my neighbor's house. Mrs. Henderson, Agnes. She was 80 sharp as a tack and missed nothing. I needed to know what they did here on Tuesday. I needed to know what they took. I stood on the gravel, the useless phone heavy in my hand. The letter from the bank felt like a razor blade in my pocket. Kovacs. Anna Kovacs. He had kept that name, that sacred piece of my past, like a burglar keeps a skeleton key, waiting. I looked at my small house. The white paint was peeling, the porch swing Alice loved was listing to one side. It had always been my sanctuary. Now it felt like a crime scene. If they had my mother's maiden name, what else did they have? The mortgage application. The line of credit. They needed proof of my assets. They needed my 401k statements, my pension details. My blood turned to ice. Tuesday. They weren't just here for a minute. They were here for an hour. I walked fast across my patchy lawn to Mrs. Henderson's. Agnes Henderson had lived next door for 45 years. She and Alice had shared countless cups of coffee over our shared fence. Agnes was 72, sharp as a tack, and missed nothing. She was watering her prize-winning azaleas, her back to me. "Agnes," I called out. My voice was rough. She turned, her face immediately creasing with concern when she saw me. "Gabe." "Goodness, you look like you've seen a ghost. Come in, I just made coffee." "No, Agnes, I can't stay." I gripped the top rail of her fence. My knuckles were white. "I need to ask you something. It's important." She put down her watering can. "Anything, Gabe. You know that." Last Tuesday, I had a cardiology appointment in Portland. I was gone all morning." "I remember," she said, nodding. "I saw your truck leave early." Did you see anyone come by the house while I was gone?" Agnes's face clouded. She looked uncomfortable. "Oh, Gabe." I didn't want to say anything. I assumed you knew. I thought he was just helping. My stomach dropped. "Who, Agnes?" "It was Matt," she said, lowering her voice. "He and his wife, Nicole. They got here about an hour after you left. I was pruning these very bushes." "And they went inside," I pushed. "Yes. Matt used his key. I almost waved, but, well, Nicole seemed to be in a hurry. They were in there for a long time, Gabe. Almost a full hour. I thought it was odd. I figured they were just dropping something off for you, but they stayed so long." I just stared at her, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying speed. "Agnes," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "When they left, were they carrying anything?" Agnes frowned, thinking. Her eyes unfocused as she replayed the memory. Yes, they were. Matt was just Matt. But Nicole, she was carrying that big beige tote bag she always has. The one that looks like it costs a fortune." She paused. "You know, it's funny. It looked heavy, stuffed full. I could see the corners of papers, folders, sticking out the top. I remember thinking, that girl must be bringing work home, but I just figured they'd picked up your mail for you." Stuffed full of papers. I couldn't breathe. "Thank you, Agnes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I turned and started walking back to my house. "Gabe." "Is everything all right?" she called after me. I didn't answer. I just raised a hand, a weak wave of acknowledgement. My walk turned into a jog. I fumbled with my keys at my own back door, the one Matt and Nicole had walked through so easily. I burst into the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't go to the safe. That's where I kept the real documents, the ones that mattered. No, I went to the one place a son should respect, the one place a child should never, ever violate. I went to my office. It was more of a nook, really. A small room off the living room where Alice kept her sewing machine and I kept my old roll-top desk. This was where I paid my bills. This was where I kept my day-to-day life. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my metal file cabinet. It didn't screech. It was well-oiled. I'm an engineer. I take care of my tools. But the contents, it wasn't a mess. A stranger would have thought it was perfectly normal. But I knew. The files were out of order. I am a man of systems. My files are alphabetical. Auto insurance, bank statements, house deed, medical, pension. Pension was filed behind taxes. Bank statements was shoved in front of auto. They had been here. They had been in this drawer. I pulled the folders out one by one, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them on the floor. The pension folder, empty. The 401k statements folder, empty. The tax returns folder. They'd taken the last 5 years. I sank into my old wooden desk chair. It groaned under my weight. They didn't just try to steal my identity. They had stolen it. They had come into my home, my sacred space, and rifled through my life. They had taken the proof of my assets. They were building a case. The mortgage application wasn't Plan A. The fraudulent line of credit wasn't Plan B. They were a coordinated attack. They were trying to find out exactly how much I had, where it was, and how they could get their hands on it. The $600,000 house. That was just what they thought they could get. Now, armed with my 401k statements, my pension details, they were coming back for the rest. I looked at the phone on my desk. The old beige rotary phone that Alice had refused to get rid of. I felt so alone. So utterly and completely alone. This was bigger than me. This wasn't a family squabble. This wasn't a spoiled son. This was a conspiracy. I picked up the receiver. My fingers, stained with grease and shaking with rage, fumbled on the numbers. I couldn't call the police. Not yet. Not on my own son. But I knew who to call. The one man Alice had trusted as much as she trusted me. The only other man on earth who knew the truth. "Peterson Law Offices," a crisp voice answered. "Get me Peterson," I said, my voice breaking. "Tell him it's Gabe Hayes. Tell him it's happening." I didn't bother changing my clothes. I still had grease under my fingernails from that morning's coffee maker repair. It felt like a lifetime ago. I grabbed my keys, walked past my ransacked file cabinet, and didn't look back. The engine of my 1998 Ford F-150 turned over with a familiar, comforting groan. It was an old truck, reliable, honest. It had dents and scratches, and every single one had a story. It was a truck that had never lied to me. I pulled onto the 2-lane highway heading east toward Portland. The 90-minute drive was usually something I enjoyed. I'd listen to the oldies station, watch the tall Oregon pines blur past, and think about what Alice would want for dinner. Today there was no music, just the thrum of the engine and the deafening roar of my own thoughts. $50 million. And my son was trying to steal a few thousand from my 401k. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I thought about Matt as a boy. I remembered his 10th birthday. He wanted the new Nintendo. All his friends had one. We didn't buy it for him. Instead, I took him to the workshop and we spent a month building a Pinewood Derby car. He cried at first. But when that car won first place, the look on his face, it wasn't the joy of getting something. It was the pride of building something. That's what Alice and I wanted for him. We wanted him to feel that. We wanted him to stand on his own 2 feet. We always agreed. Alice and I, we talked about it countless nights. We saw what money did to other families. We saw our friends, the Martins, whose son was in and out of rehab, all funded by their trust fund. We saw the Johnsons, whose daughter hadn't worked a day in her life and treated her parents like servants. "We can't let that happen to Matt Gabe," Alice had said, her voice firm, as we sat at the kitchen table signing the final trust documents all those years ago. "He has to be his own man. This money, it can't be a gift. It has to be a responsibility, or it will be a curse." So we kept the secret. We lived on my engineer's salary. We saved. We bought this house. We drove this truck. We lived a good, simple American life. And all the while, that other life, the $50 million life, was just sitting there, waiting. Now, as the skyline of Portland pushed up against the gray sky, I felt a cold knot of doubt. Had we been wrong by trying to protect him? Did we just make him hungry? By keeping him from the truth, did we accidentally create this resentment? Did he look at his simple, retired father and feel nothing but contempt? Did he think I was just a foolish old man hoarding a small nest egg when all this time I was guarding a fortress he couldn't even see? I didn't know. I didn't know the man who had rifled through my desk. I didn't know the man who had used his dead mother's insurance claim to steal my mother's maiden name. I only knew one thing. He was my son. And he had declared war on me. I pulled into the parking garage for Peterson's law firm. I didn't have a plan. But I had the truth. And I had a $50 million problem. Peterson's law firm, Peterson Shaw and Associates, took up the top 3 floors of the tallest glass tower in Portland. It was the kind of place that smelled like old money and new carpet. The receptionist, a young woman in a sharp black blazer, looked at me over the rim of her glasses. I knew what she saw. A 70-year-old man in a worn flannel shirt, decade-old jeans and work boots that still had mud on the heels. I still had grease under my fingernails from the coffee maker. I probably looked like I had wandered into the wrong building, like I was looking for the janitor's office. "Gabriel Hayes for Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice quiet. Her eyes widened just a fraction in surprise. She checked her computer. "Oh, yes, Mr. Hayes. Of course. He's expecting you. Right this way, sir." Her "sir" was sudden a pivot from dismissal to deference. Peterson had clearly flagged my name in their system. I was led through a maze of beige walls and abstract art until we reached a corner office with a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the entire city. And there, sitting behind a desk so large it could have doubled as a boat, was John Peterson. Peterson was my age, but he looked like he'd been carved from granite. Sharp suit, perfect hair, a mind like a steel trap. He'd been my friend since college, long before the money, long before any of it. He was the only man on earth I trusted with the truth. He stood up as I entered, a genuine smile on his face that faded as soon as he saw my expression. "Gabe," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm. "You look like hell. What's happened?" I didn't answer. I didn't sit down. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket. I pulled out the folded, crumpled mortgage application and the letter from Bank of America. I laid them side by side on his pristine, polished mahogany desk. The greasy smudge from my thumb on the bank letter stood out like a scar. Peterson put on his own reading glasses. He picked up the mortgage application first. I watched his eyes scan the page, his expression hardening. He saw the $600,000 amount. He saw my name. He saw the space for my signature. Then he put it down and picked up the rejection letter for the $20,000 line of credit. He read it, his jaw tightening. He looked up at me. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look surprised. He just looked terribly, profoundly sad. "So," he said, his voice a low rumble, "it started." He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I was afraid this day would come, Gabe. I truly was. I kept hoping Matt would grow up, that he'd find his own way. He found a way all right," I said, my voice thick with anger. "He found his way into my file cabinet. He used his mother's death to get my mother's maiden name. He's been planning this, John." Peterson nodded slowly. "They get desperate. The children always get desperate." He stood up and walked not to a desk drawer, but to a massive fireproof safe built into the wall behind a framed painting. He spun a combination lock, the clicks precise and silent. The heavy door swung open. Inside wasn't cash. It was rows and rows of thick bound ledgers. He pulled one out. It was dark blue, hardbound, and embossed with gold letters. It didn't say Gabe Hayes. It said, "The Hayes Alice Trust." He placed the massive file on his desk right next to the fraudulent, flimsy mortgage application. The contrast was stark. One was a desperate lie. The other was the $50 million truth. "Well," Peterson said, opening the cover, "Alice was a brilliant woman. She knew this might happen. She insisted on a few safeguards. She called it the character clause." He looked up at me. "The question is, Gabe, are you ready to use it?" Peterson ran his hand over the heavy blue ledger. It was embossed with gold letters, "The Hayes Alice Trust." "Alice was brilliant," he said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet, expensive office. She always knew, this day might come." I just nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. Alice always knew. She knew me better than I knew myself, and she knew our son. Let me explain something. Something my son Matt never knew. Something I never told anyone in our small Oregon town. To Matt, to Nicole, to my neighbors. I'm just Gabe Hayes, the retired engineer from the aerospace plant. The guy who lives on his pension and his 401k. The man who drives a 20-year-old truck and spends his mornings trying to fix a broken coffee maker. That's the lie. Or rather, it's the cover story. A cover story Alice and I agreed on 30 years ago. You see, I wasn't just an engineer. I was a very, very good one. Back in the early 80s, long before I went to work for the big plant, I was working in my own garage. I was tinkering. I was obsessed with a single problem: high-temperature friction in turbine engines, and I solved it. I developed a new metal alloy, a ceramic metallic composite that could withstand temperatures that would turn steel to soup. It was lightweight, self-lubricating, and nearly indestructible. I patented it. Hayes Alloy 7B. I thought I'd sell it for a few $1,000. Maybe buy Alice a new car. Instead, a defense contractor, one of the biggest in the world, bought the patent. They didn't just buy it. They bought my life. They bought my silence. They bought my future. They use that alloy in everything now. Jet engines, medical implants, deep-sea drilling equipment. The check they gave me. I still remember Alice and I sitting at our kitchen table, the same table Matt and Nicole just sat at, just staring at it. It had so many zeros I thought it was a typo. $50 million. Alice and I sat at that table for 3 days. We didn't sleep. We just talked. We could have bought a mansion in Beverly Hills. We could have bought a private island. We could have become them. People like Nicole. But Alice, she was the smart one. She was the foundation. Gabe, she said, her hand covering mine. This isn't money. This is poison. It's a curse if we let it be. It will ruin Matt. It will make him weak. We can't let him know. Not until he's a man. Not until he's earned the knowledge. So we made a decision. We called Peterson. We created the Hayes Alice Trust, an irrevocable trust. We locked it away. We put it in investments so secure, so anonymous, that it just grew, silently in the dark. And we went on living. I took the steady, respectable job at the aerospace plant. We lived on my salary. We drove Fords. We saved for Matt's college in a normal savings bond account. We lived on my pension. We lived on my 401k. We lived a good, simple American life. Matt and Nicole, they had just torn my office apart. They had stolen my pension statements. They had stolen my 401k reports. They had stolen my tax returns. They thought they had found my treasure. They were fighting over the bait. They were trying to steal the few $100,000 I kept in my decoy accounts, while the $50 million whale swam right beneath their feet. And they had no idea. Peterson turned a page in the heavy blue ledger. "And here it is," he said, tapping the paper. "Section 4, Article B, the Alice Hayes Character Clause." His voice was flat professional, reading the legal text that Alice had insisted on. "The assets of this trust are designated primarily for the benefit of any and all grandchildren of the creators. The primary beneficiary, Matthew Hayes," he paused, "may only assume a managerial role as executor of the trust upon demonstrating." Peterson stopped reading and looked up at me over the rim of his expensive glasses. "Demonstrating the highest standard of financial responsibility and moral character." I just stared at him. Highest moral character. Peterson closed the massive book. The sound was a heavy final thud that echoed in the silent office. "Your son Gabe, in his desperate, greedy, and frankly stupid attempt to steal what he thought was a few $100,000, has just legally proven that he is morally and financially unfit to ever touch 50 million. The irony was so bitter I could taste it, like ash in my mouth. By trying to steal the scraps from my table, he had just set fire to his own inheritance. He had violated the one rule Alice put in place to protect him from himself. He had failed the test. "So what do we do?" I finally asked. My voice was a low growl. "We do nothing," Peterson said. His eyes were cold. "We let them. They've committed fraud. They've committed identity theft. They think they're holding all the cards. We let them play their hand. We wait for them to make their next move." I nodded. I stood up. I felt heavier, but also clearer. I drove the 90 minutes back to my house. The anger from the morning was gone. It had been replaced by something cold, something hard. I had lost my son, not to death like I lost Alice, but to this, to weakness, to greed, to whatever that woman Nicole had turned him into. I pulled my old truck up the gravel driveway. It was dark now. The porch light was off. The house looked cold. But there was someone waiting. A man. He was standing in the shadows by my front door. My heart jumped into my throat. Was it Matt? Had he come back? The man stepped forward into the single beam of my headlights. He wasn't Matt. He was wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit him, and he was holding a stack of papers. He looked bored. "Gabriel Hayes," he called out, his voice flat. "Yes." He walked forward, pulled a single document from the stack, and pushed it into my chest. "You've been served." I looked down at the papers in my hand. The fluorescent white of the paper glowed in the dark. My son and his wife weren't just trying to steal from me. They were suing me. I stood there in the dark. The man's footsteps crunched on the gravel as he walked back to his car, disappearing into the night. He had left the papers in my hand. They were still warm from his grasp. I didn't move. I just stood there under the single weak bulb of my porch light, the smell of the damp pines thick in the air. I looked down at what he had given me. A summons. A legal document from the state of Oregon County of Clackamas. Nicole Hayes and Matthew Hayes. Plaintiffs versus Gabriel Hayes, defendant. Plaintiffs. Defendant. My son. Suing me. My hands, the hands of an engineer, hands that had built engines and fixed transmissions. They were shaking. I fumbled with the staple, tearing the paper. I skipped past the legal boilerplate, looking for the what, and then I saw it. Seek monetary damages in the amount of $600,000. 600,000. The number just hung there. It didn't seem real. It was an abstraction, a string of zeros. It was the price of the house they wanted. They were suing me for the house. They were suing me for the right to own something they couldn't afford. I felt a bitter, dry laugh try to escape my throat. Of course, this was the next move. This was the, "You will regret this." But then I kept reading, and the laughter died. Because it wasn't just about the money. Oh God, if only it had been just about the money. I read the next line. "And furthermore, petition this court for an emergency hearing to establish a conservatorship over the person and estate of Gabriel Hayes, citing advanced age and cognitive impairment." Cognitive impairment. Conservatorship. The words hit me harder than any physical blow. They weren't just trying to get a house. They were trying to get me. They were trying to take my life. I stumbled back and sat hard on the old porch swing Alice loved. The chains groaned under my weight. I read on my eyes, scanning the sworn affidavits attached to the petition. The lies. They were so detailed. First, Nicole's statement. It was poetry. It was fiction. "I, Nicole Hayes, being of sound mind, do swear that my father-in-law Gabriel Hayes did on numerous occasions, including but not limited to Thanksgiving of 2023 and Christmas of 2024, verbally promise to take care of our future and buy us a home as a family asset." I gripped the paper. Thanksgiving. I remembered Thanksgiving. I remembered telling Matt he needed to start contributing to his own 401k, not just relying on mine. Her lies continued. Relying on this repeated promise from my father-in-law, she wrote, my husband and I made significant, irreversible financial decisions. I left my part-time job as a consultant to prepare for our new home, and we placed a substantial non-refundable deposit on the property, all based on his word. A non-refundable deposit. That was the hook. They were claiming promissory estoppel, a legal trap. They were saying they had been damaged by a promise I never made. I never promised them a dime. Alice and I had one rule, one single ironclad rule: you make your own way. We gave Matt an education. We gave him love. We gave him a stable home. We never ever promised him a free ride. And he knew it. But the petition wasn't finished. The next page was worse. It was the request for the conservatorship. It was Matt's sworn statement, or at least it had his signature on it. The words were pure Nicole. My father, Gabriel Hayes, has shown significant signs of cognitive decline over the past year. I read on my stomach churning. He has become dangerously forgetful. He often misplaces his keys and wallet. He has become reclusive, refusing to see family or friends. He has exhibited paranoia, accusing us of things we have not done. They were using my quiet, frugal life as evidence of self-neglect. They were twisting my privacy into isolation. And then came the final dagger. The most alarming sign of his impairment, Matt's statement read, is his complete lack of memory regarding his promise to buy us our home. He became agitated and confused when we presented him with the paperwork, as if he had no recollection of our many conversations. We are not angry. We are terrified. We are afraid he is a danger to himself. We fear he will, in his confused state, mismanage or give away the assets he worked his whole life to build. I dropped the papers. They scattered across the old wooden planks of the porch. I finally understood. This wasn't about a house. The house was just the prize. This was about control. My refusal. My simple, firm no. They weren't seeing it as a boundary. They were twisting it. They were painting it as proof that I was insane. They were building a legal cage for me. Declare me incompetent. Seize control of my estate, the 401k, the pension, the small-town house they thought was my only asset. They would get the $600,000 and everything else. I would be a prisoner locked in a nursing home, legally dead, while they drained my life's work. And the beauty of their plan, the truly evil genius of it, was that the very act of me fighting back, of me getting angry, of me saying they were conspiring against me, would just be more proof of my paranoia. They had backed me into a corner. I sat there for a long time, the cold night air seeping into my bones. The porch swing was silent. They thought they were dealing with a forgetful, simple old man. They thought they had trapped me. They had just made the single biggest mistake of their lives. They thought I was weak. They forgot. I'm an engineer. I don't just fix machines. I find weak points. I analyze systems. And I take them apart piece by piece. This lawsuit wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of war. I bent down my knees, cracking in protest. I gathered the scattered papers, every single one. I put them in order. Then I went inside, locked my door, and picked up the phone. Peterson Law Offices, the answering service said. This is Gabriel Hayes. I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. Get me John Peterson. I don't care what time it is. I don't care if he's in bed. Get him on the phone, now. It was happening. I was in Peterson's office at 9 a.m. sharp. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night in my old recliner. The lawsuit papers spread out on the floor under the lamplight. I just stared at them, watching the words blur. Cognitive impairment. Danger to himself. Conservatorship. The anger from the night before had cooled. It had settled into something hard, heavy, and cold inside my chest. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was procedure. I was an engineer. I had a complex problem in front of me, a system designed for maximum destruction, and I needed to figure out how to take it apart. When I walked into Peterson's office, he didn't offer me coffee. He didn't ask how I was. He was all business. His massive mahogany desk was clear except for a single slim manila folder. He looked like he'd been up all night, too. "You were right to call me Gabe," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I made some calls. I keep a private investigator on retainer for sensitive family matters. He's very fast and very thorough." Peterson opened the folder. He didn't need to build suspense. He just stated the facts. "Your son Matt and his wife Nicole," he said, "are not just greedy. They are desperate. And desperate people, Gabe. They're stupid. And they're dangerous." He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. "This is a summary report from my investigator." He started with Nicole. Her lifestyle, the one she's so proud of. It's a house of cards. Built on debt. I picked up the paper. I'm an engineer. I'm good with numbers. But these numbers, they didn't make sense. It was a credit report summary. "That's not a typo, Gabe," Peterson said, watching my face. "You're reading it correctly. Your daughter-in-law, Nicole, is currently carrying $83,000 in outstanding high-interest credit card debt. $83,000. I thought of the $80 bottle of wine she'd brought to my house, the designer handbag, the constant casual, cruel mentions of trips I couldn't afford, restaurants I'd never heard of. "It's all here," Peterson continued, tapping the paper. "American Express, Visa, Nordstrom, Saks, Fifth Avenue, 3 different furniture store cards. She's been living like a millionaire. The problem is, as far as we can tell, she doesn't have a job. Not one she's declared taxes on anyway." She wasn't just bragging. She was panicked. She wasn't just spending. She was drowning. "But Matt," I said the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "Matt has a good job. He's a regional sales manager. He must make good money. He can't be okay with this." Peterson's face didn't change. He shook his head slowly. He slid a second piece of paper across the desk. This one was a printout of what looked like an internal company memo. "Matt had a good job," Peterson corrected me. "He was terminated 6 months ago." I stared at the paper. Terminated. Fired. "Why?" I whispered. "Embezzlement," Peterson said. The word was ugly. Clinical. He was caught skimming $5,000 from the corporate expense account. Falsifying receipts. His company, John Deere, didn't want the bad press. They're a family company. They fired him quietly. They gave him 6 months to pay the money back before they pressed criminal charges. The pieces fell into place. Not with a click, with the sound of a building collapsing. 6 months. He had been unemployed for 6 months. He had been pretending to go to work every morning. He had been coming to my house, eating my food, lying to my face. The 6-month deadline to pay back the stolen money. It was probably right. Now. The stolen 401k statements. The fraudulent line of credit. The lawsuit. This wasn't about ambition. This wasn't about living their best life. This was about survival. The house, I said, the realization hitting me. The $600,000 house. "Exactly," Peterson said. "It's not a dream. It's a lifeline. They're bankrupt, Gabe. They're about to lose everything. They're not just trying to buy a house with your money. They're trying to use you. My investigator believes the plan was to get a massive mortgage in your name immediately, take a cash-out equity loan against the property to pay their debts, and then most likely let the house go into foreclosure, destroying your credit, not theirs. A drowning man pulling his own father underwater to use him as a flotation device. I thought about the lawsuit. The claim that I was the one who was cognitively impaired. The accusation that I was the one who was forgetful and a danger to my own finances. They weren't just attacking me. They were projecting. They were accusing me of their sins. I looked at Peterson. They've stolen my identity. They've lied to the court in a sworn affidavit. They've tried to defraud a bank. And Matt embezzled. Yes, Peterson said. So, I said, feeling the cold engineering logic return my voice flat. They're not just immoral, they're criminals. Peterson nodded. They are. And they've just given us all the ammunition we need. They've handed us the rope. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked down at the city. All those people living their lives completely unaware of the poison flowing just beneath the surface. Good, I said, turning back to Peterson. Because they don't know who they're dealing with. They think I'm a forgetful old man living on a pension. They think I'm weak. They think they've trapped me. I looked at the folder on his desk. The Hayes Alice Trust. The $50 million secret. They have no idea what's coming for them. Peterson allowed himself a thin, cold smile. No, Gabe. They really don't. I got home from Peterson's office with the investigator's report in my briefcase. The house was cold. The coffee maker was still in pieces on the counter. I sat at the kitchen table. The lawsuit papers were spread out on the worn formica. Cognitive impairment. Danger to himself. Conservatorship. The words seemed to pulse in the quiet room. My phone rang. It vibrated on the tabletop, a harsh buzzing sound that made my teeth ache. I looked at the screen. Matt. I let it ring 3 times, each buzz echoing the hollow space where my trust used to be. Then I picked up. I didn't say hello, I just waited. Dad. His voice was small, hesitant. Not the voice of a confident sales manager. Not the voice of a man suing his father. It was the voice of a child testing the waters. What is it, Matt? My voice was flat. Dad, look, Nicole and I, we've been talking. This whole thing has it's gone too far. I waited. I knew this tone. This was the prelude to a request. This lawsuit, he said, rushing his words. It's just paperwork. It's lawyers being lawyers. We don't want this. Nicole doesn't want this. We just want the house. I could hear Nicole whispering in the background, sharp and urgent. Tell him the deal. Look, Dad. Matt said, his voice suddenly stronger, rehearsed. We can make this all go away. Right now. We call the lawyers. We drop the lawsuit. We drop the conservatorship petition. Everything. It all goes back to normal. All you have to do is sign the mortgage papers. I almost laughed. A dry, bitter sound. It was so arrogant. So stupid. They thought they could file a legal document attempting to strip me of my rights as a human being and then use it as a negotiating tactic. They thought they could accuse me in a court of law of being mentally incompetent and then offer to take it back if I gave them $600,000. It was the logic of a kidnapper. Give us the ransom and we'll return the hostage. The hostage was me. And as I sat there listening to my son's pathetic, manipulative plea, I suddenly remembered another time. Matt was 10. My wallet was on the dresser. Alice and I were getting ready for church. I went to get it, and I noticed the cash was gone. $20. I knew it was Matt. I just knew. I confronted him. He did exactly what he was doing now. He lied. He cried. He denied it. I don't know, Dad. Maybe it fell out. I was soft. I was the dad. I was ready to let it go, but Alice was the foundation. She was the steel. She grabbed the empty wallet, walked into his room, and just stood there. She didn't yell. She just waited. She waited until he broke. He finally pulled the crumpled $20 bill from under his mattress. he sobbed. I just wanted the new video game, everyone else has it. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to say it was okay. Alice didn't move. She looked at him, her eyes clear and hard as diamonds. You will pay it back, she said. Not shouting, just fact. You will mow Mrs. Henderson's lawn. You will wash my car. You will stack firewood. You will work until you have earned $20, and you will give it back to your father. We do not raise thieves in this house. It took him 3 weeks. 3 weeks of blisters and sweat. When he finally handed me that worn, sweaty $20 bill, he was crying again. But they were different tears. He was proud. He had made it right. Alice had been strict, and she had been right. I looked at the phone in my hand. Where did that strictness go? It died with her. After Alice passed, I was the only one left, and I was just the soft dad. I was the one who wanted to fix things. I was the one who saw his sadness and just wanted him to be happy. I paid off his credit card debt when he got in a little trouble after college. I co-signed for his first apartment. I loaned him money for his wedding to Nicole, money I knew I'd never see again. I hadn't been a father. I had been an enabler. Alice hadn't just been raising a son. She had been managing a flaw, a fundamental weakness in his character. And when she died, the dam broke. I hadn't just lost my wife 5 years ago. I had lost my son, too. I just didn't know it until now. This monster on the phone. He wasn't created by Nicole. He was allowed by me. Dad. Matt's voice was tinny nervous. Dad, are you there? Did you hear me? It's a good deal. We'll drop the lawsuit. You just have to sign. The memory of Alice, of her strength, her iron will. It settled over me like a cloak. I finally understood what she would have done. She would have made him face the consequences. My softness was the disease. It was time for the cure. No, I said. What, Dad? It's a good deal. Everyone wins. No, I said again, and this time my voice wasn't weak. It wasn't the voice of a soft, grieving widower. It was the voice of Gabriel Hayes, the engineer, the man who built things that last. You filed a lawsuit, Matt, I said, my voice cold. You signed your name to a document that calls me insane. You accused me of being a paranoid old fool. Dad, that was just lawyer talk, he said, his voice rising in panic. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything, I said. You put this in front of a judge. You wanted the court's opinion. Now, you're going to get it. Dad, no. Wait, we can fix this. Don't do this. I'll see you in court, son. I hung up the phone. I looked at the lawsuit papers. I looked at Peterson's report. The battle was just beginning, and I was finally ready to fight. I hung up on Matt. I'll see you in court. The words tasted like acid. I needed air. I needed normal. My truck felt like a cage. Peterson's office was a fortress, and my house was a crime scene. I needed normal. I drove to the Roundup Cafe. It's a small place on Main Street. I've been eating breakfast there every Friday for 30 years. Alice and I had our own booth. Booth number 4, the one by the window. After she passed, I kept coming. It was routine. It was comfort. The bell over the door chimed just like it always does, and the entire cafe went silent. It wasn't just a lull in conversation. It was a stop. Forks on plates stopped scraping. Conversations died mid-word. It was the kind of silence you get when a cop walks into a rough bar or when the town pariah walks into church. Brenda, the owner, was behind the counter. She's a tough woman my age who's probably poured me 1,000 cups of coffee. She usually yells, "Hey Gabe," the usual. She didn't yell, she saw me. Her face tightened, and she immediately looked down, busying herself by wiping a counter that was already clean. I felt cold. a chill that had nothing to do with the Oregon weather. I walked toward my booth. I could feel the eyes on me. Every person in that diner, the ranchers in their work coats, the old-timers at the counter, they were staring. I slid into booth number 4. The vinyl was cracked in the same places. It still smelled like maple syrup and old coffee, but it felt wrong. It felt hostile. Brenda finally came over. She wasn't carrying a coffee pot. She was holding a menu I hadn't looked at since 1995. "Can I help you, Mr. Hayes?" she asked. "Mr. Hayes, not Gabe, not the usual. Mr. Hayes." I looked up at her. Her face was a polite professional mask. The warmth I'd known for 30 years was gone. "Brenda," I said, my voice confused. "It's me, Gabe." "I know who you are, sir," she said, her voice flat. "What can I get you?" Just the usual, Brenda. Black coffee." "Right away." She turned and walked off. She didn't stop to chat. She didn't ask about the truck. She didn't mention the rain. She came back, slapped the mug down so hard the coffee sloshed onto the saucer and left. The silence in the cafe broke, but it didn't go back to normal. It was replaced by a low, buzzing murmur. Whispers. I tried to ignore it. I tried to drink my coffee. It tasted burnt. I picked up the local paper, but I couldn't read the words. I was listening. I couldn't help it. "Suing his own son," I heard from the booth behind me. No, that was wrong. They were suing me. "Poor Nicole," a woman's voice said from the counter. She just looked devastated. Said they're just trying to help him. Brenda said he promised them a house. $600,000. And now he's claiming he doesn't remember. Just forgot. Like it was nothing. It's the confusion, that's what I heard. Sad, really. He was always such a nice man. Confusion, forgot. Sad. The words from the lawsuit. I felt my stomach clench. This wasn't just diner gossip. This was a campaign. This was Nicole. She hadn't just filed a lawsuit. She had gone to work. She had come here. She had sat at this counter. And she had cried. She had cried her crocodile tears and told them all her story. The story of the forgetful, cruel old father-in-law and the loving, worried children who just wanted to help. She was poisoning the well. She was turning my town, my home, against me. This wasn't just about winning in court. This was about destroying my reputation. It was about isolating me. It was about making sure that when I did fight back, everyone in town would just nod sadly and say, "See, he is paranoid. He is confused. Poor man." She was building her case in the court of public opinion. I looked up from my coffee. At the counter, Bill and Jerry, my fishing buddies, were finishing their eggs. They saw me looking. Bill dropped his gaze. "Jerry," he turned his back, deliberately. That was it. That was the final nail. They had known me for 40 years. We had buried friends together. We had watched our children grow up. And one tearful, slanderous story from a 40-year-old woman they barely knew. And I was out. I was the crazy old man. I pulled a $5 bill from my wallet and dropped it on the table. The coffee was untouched. I stood up. The whispering stopped again. That heavy, judgmental silence fell over the room. I walked toward the door. I didn't run. I am Gabriel Hayes. I am not a coward. I walked slowly, my head held high, feeling every single pair of eyes on my back. I pushed the door open. The bell chimed, announcing my exit. I stepped out into the cold, clean air. It felt good to breathe again. I had just lost my son. I had just lost my town. This was no longer about a house. This wasn't even about the $50 million Peterson was guarding. This was about my name. This was about my mind. And I would sooner burn my entire fortune to the ground than let them take that from me. I drove home from the Roundup Cafe. The 10-minute drive felt like an hour. My town, my friends, my home. Nicole had done it. In one morning, with a few well-placed tears and a story about a confused, forgetful old man she had poisoned 30 years of relationships. She had turned me into a pariah. I sat in my truck in my own driveway for a long time. I looked at my house. It didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a fishbowl. I felt the eyes of my neighbors. Agnes Henderson's curtains twitched. I wondered if Nicole had gotten to her too. I felt trapped. I finally went inside and locked the deadbolt. A useless gesture. The invasion had already happened. I was sitting in my old recliner, the silent house pressing in on me when the knock came. It wasn't a friendly knock. It wasn't Matt forgetting his key. It wasn't Agnes with a slice of pie. It was a sharp official rap. The kind of knock that means you don't have a choice about answering. I opened the door. A woman was standing on my porch. She was in her late 30s, wearing a navy blue pantsuit, sensible shoes, and an expression that was completely blank. She held a clipboard like a shield. "Mr. Gabriel Hayes?" she asked. Her voice was flat. "Yes." She held up a laminated ID badge. "My name is Ms. Evans. I'm with Adult Protective Services." The words just hung there in the cold afternoon air. Adult Protective Services. My stomach turned to ice. This was it. This was the next step in their attack. They hadn't just told people I was crazy. They had reported me to the government. "May I come in, Mr. Hayes?" It wasn't a question. I stepped aside. I felt like a criminal in my own home. She walked in, not wiping her feet, her eyes scanning everything. She didn't look at my family photos. She didn't look at the beautiful ship in a bottle I spent a winter building. She looked at the dust on the end table. She looked at the stack of old newspapers by my chair. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Matt and Nicole had sat just days before. She placed her clipboard down. "Mr. Hayes," she began, her voice a monotone drone. "We received a detailed report this morning. An anonymous report, expressing serious concern for your welfare." Anonymous. I almost laughed. I could hear Nicole's voice in that word. The feigned concern. The crocodile tears. "The report alleges," she consulted her notes, "severe self-neglect, social isolation, and signs of increasing paranoia." Paranoia. There was that word again. The word from the lawsuit. "I'm fine," I said. My voice was rough. "That's what we're here to determine," Ms. Evans said, clicking her pen. "I just need to ask you a few routine questions. This is for your own protection, sir." The humiliation felt like a physical weight pressing me down into the chair. This woman half my age was here to protect me from myself, all based on the lies of a desperate, greedy woman and the son who enabled her. "What did you have for breakfast today, Mr. Hayes?" The question caught me off guard. "What? Your breakfast?" she repeated, her eyes unblinking. "The report says you're not eating properly." I thought back. The coffee maker. The call from the bank. The trip to the diner. The coffee I hadn't drunk. "I had coffee," I said. "I wasn't hungry." She wrote something down. I could hear the scratch of her pen. It sounded deafeningly loud. "Are you taking all your prescribed medications?" I held up my hands. "I take one pill, for blood pressure, every morning. I haven't missed a day in 10 years. She wrote, "The report says you've been confused, forgetful. Are you aware of what day it is, Mr. Hayes?" I stared at her. "It's Friday." "And the month?" "It's October. It's October 19th. And the year? It's 2025. And who is the President of the United States? I gave her the name. I felt my face flush with anger. I am an engineer. I designed fuel system components for aerospace. I have balanced budgets that could buy this entire neighborhood. And this woman, this bureaucrat, was asking me if I knew what year it was. She just nodded, writing. Mr. Hayes, she said, her voice softening, but it was a clinical false softness. The report also mentions paranoia. It says you believe your family is conspiring against you. Do you often feel that people are watching you or plotting against you? And there it was. The trap. The perfect, elegant, inescapable trap. How do I answer that? If I say no, I'm lying. If I say yes, my son and his wife are conspiring against me, they are trying to steal my house, they did steal my identity. What does that sound like to her? It sounds like paranoia. It confirms their entire case. Every word of truth I could say would be twisted and used as a weapon against me as proof of my insanity. I looked at Mrs. Evans. She was just doing her job, a job fueled by the lies of my son. I took a slow breath. Ms. Evans, I said, my voice quiet, I believe I am a private person, and I believe my privacy is being violated, but I am not paranoid. She just wrote something down. I understand. Now, Mr. Hayes, I do need to take a quick look around your home, just to verify the living conditions. Standard procedure. She stood up. She didn't wait for permission. I had to follow her. I felt like a visitor, a suspect. I watched this stranger walk through my life, judging every corner of it. She walked into the kitchen. She opened my refrigerator. There isn't much food in here, Mr. Hayes. Her voice echoed slightly. I live alone, I said, my voice tight. I shop every 3 days. I don't like food to go bad. I bought groceries 2 days ago. There's eggs, milk, some vegetables. She didn't reply. She just closed the door. She went to my bathroom. My bathroom. She looked in the medicine cabinet. She saw my blood pressure pills, my shaving cream, my deodorant. She was checking to see if I was capable. Then she went to my bedroom. My bed was unmade. I hadn't made it. I had been reeling from the lawsuit. I hadn't seen the point. She made a note. Unkempt sleeping area. And that was when something inside me finally snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't move. But the memory hit me so hard I almost staggered. This room, this exact room, this was the room where Alice spent her last 5 years. This was the room where I had set up the hospice bed. This was the room where I kept the whiteboard with her medication schedule written out every 2 hours, day and night. This was the room I kept immaculate. I learned to change IV bags. I managed her painkillers. I sat in that very chair in the corner, holding her hand for 1,825 nights. I had been a caregiver. I had kept another human being alive, comfortable and dignified through the worst battle of her life. And this woman, this stranger, sent here by the son I raised while I was caring for his mother, was standing in my bedroom marking me down as unclean because my bed wasn't made. The rage was so pure, so white-hot, I thought it would burn me from the inside out. I said nothing. Ms. Evans finally clicked her pen shut. She turned to me in the hallway. Mr. Hayes, she said back to her neutral bureaucratic tone, the report from your family is detailed, and while you present as coherent, there is a significant discrepancy between their claims and your presentation. There's a discrepancy because they are lying, I said, my voice shaking with contained fury. That's one possibility, she said, not blinking. The other possibility is that you are suffering from anosognosia, a condition where you are unaware of your own deficit. Anosognosia, a clinical-sounding word for crazy. Your family has filed a formal petition with the court for conservatorship, she said. The report I file today will be added to that case. Given the conflicting information, I am legally obligated to recommend a full, independent cognitive and psychiatric evaluation. She expected me to fight her. She expected me to yell, to refuse, to prove I was the paranoid, agitated old man they said I was. I did the opposite. I took a deep breath. I smoothed the front of my flannel shirt. Good, I said. Ms. Evans blinked. Good? Yes, good. I looked her right in the eye. Set it up. I want the full evaluation. I want the best psychiatrist you have. I want the most thorough, invasive, difficult test in your arsenal. Her professional mask slipped. She looked confused. I have nothing to hide, Ms. Evans, I said, opening the front door for her. My family wanted a fight. They've been attacking me from the shadows. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I can't wait to fight them in the light. Ms. Evans left. I stood in my hallway, the silence of the house rushing back in. But it was different now. It was the silence of a home that had been violated, inspected, and judged. I walked into my bedroom and looked at the unmade bed, the indentation on the pillow where my head had been. Unkempt sleeping area. I felt a cold, clean rage, an engineer's rage. It wasn't hot. It was precise. The evaluation was scheduled for the following Monday. It was 3 hours of methodical insults. A psychologist, a man younger than my son, asked me questions in a soft, condescending voice. Can you draw me a clock, Mr. Hayes? Set the hands to 11:10. I drew the clock. I'm going to give you 5 words. I want you to remember them. Person, woman, man, camera, TV. I'll ask you for them again in 15 minutes. I nodded. I listened to his questions. I answered. I repeated his 5 stupid words. I subtracted 7 from 100 over and over all the way down. At the end, he sighed, putting his own clipboard down. Well, Mr. Hayes, he said, sounding almost disappointed, your cognitive function is perfectly normal. In fact, your recall and logic scores are in the 99th percentile for your age group. You're sharper than most 50-year-olds I see. The Adult Protective Services case was officially closed 2 days later. No findings of impairment. Case closed. I thought for one foolish, naive second that this would be the end. I thought Matt and Nicole, faced with an official report stating I was perfectly sane, would be ashamed. I thought they would retreat. I was wrong. They weren't ashamed. They were emboldened. The call came from Peterson a week later. Gabe, he said, and his voice was different. It wasn't sad. It was hard. They're not backing down. What are you talking about, John? I said. The APS case is closed. I passed their tests. It's over. No, it's not, Peterson said. That's the truly evil part. They filed a new motion with the court this morning, and they attached the APS report as evidence. But the report cleared me. Gabe, Peterson said, and I could hear him turn a page. They didn't attach the final report. They didn't attach the psychologist's evaluation. They attached the initial complaint. The one Ms. Evans filed. The one that alleges you are paranoid. The one that recommends an evaluation. They're presenting the accusation as if it's the finding. I sat down. My legs went weak. They are using their own slander, I whispered, as corroborating evidence for their lawsuit. It's a classic dirty move, Peterson said. They're painting a picture for the judge. Look, Your Honor, we're not the only ones worried. Even APS had to get involved. He's a ticking time bomb. He's paranoid. He's a danger to himself. They're building a cage of lies, and every time you get angry, every time you rightfully accuse them, you just give them more proof that you're unstable. I looked out my window. I saw Agnes Henderson bringing in her mail. She didn't look my way. The poison was still working. So what do we do, John? I felt tired. For the first time, I felt like a 70-year-old man. Then I heard Peterson's voice change. That cold, hard edge was back. "We're ready, Gabe," he said. "Ready for what?" "I got the last of the reports back. The ones we ran. The ones that show Matt was fired for embezzlement. The ones that show Nicole is $83,000 in the hole. The ones that show they are both, legally speaking, bankrupt." I stood up. I felt the strength return to my legs. "They've made their case, Gabe," Peterson said, and I could almost hear him smile. It was not a nice smile. "They think they're putting a confused old man on trial. They think they're fighting for your 401k. He paused. "They have no idea. They're about to face a $50 million financial indictment. The Clackamas County Courthouse is not an impressive building. It's a block of beige concrete and dark glass built in the 70s that smells like stale coffee and floor wax. It's a place for speeding tickets and property disputes, not high-stakes drama." But as I walked through the metal detector, my old belt buckle beeping, it felt like the Supreme Court. Peterson was already there waiting for me. He wasn't carrying his massive blue ledger. He just had a slim, mean-looking briefcase. He nodded at me, his face like stone. "Gabe, you ready for this?" "I'm ready, John." "Good," he said, "because they're already here, and they're putting on a show." We pushed through the double wooden doors into courtroom 3B. It was exactly as I pictured. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, worn wooden benches, the state flag of Oregon hanging limply next to the judge's empty chair. And then I saw them. They were sitting at the plaintiff's table side by side, my son Matt and his wife Nicole, and they were in mourning. I stopped. I actually stopped in the aisle. Nicole was dressed head to toe in a severe, expensive-looking black suit. Not navy, not charcoal. Black. Funeral black. Her hair was pulled back in a tight, joyless bun. She had a single strand of pearls on. Alice had a strand just like that. The sight of it made my stomach clench. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring straight ahead, her expression one of profound, tragic sadness. In her hand, she held a small, white, lace-edged handkerchief. Every few seconds, she would lift it not to her eyes, but to the corners of her eyes. A delicate, practiced dab, dab, dab. There were no tears. It was just the gesture. A performance for the judge, for the court, for anyone who was watching. And Matt, my son. He was in a dark suit, too. His face was pale. He looked somber. He looked like a man burdened by a terrible, necessary responsibility. The dutiful son forced to make the hardest decision of his life. He saw me. His eyes met mine for a second. I saw no guilt. I saw no shame. I saw pity. He pitied me. He genuinely believed the lie they had constructed. He had convinced himself that he was the hero of this story, the man stepping in to save his poor, confused father from himself. The sheer, staggering arrogance of it. It almost made me smile. Their lawyer, a slick-looking man in a suit that was too shiny, leaned over and whispered something to Nicole. She nodded, her face a perfect mask of sorrow, and dabbed her eyes again. They were mourning me. They were sitting in a courtroom dressed for my funeral, trying to bury me while I was still standing right in front of them. They were acting out the final scene of their play, the tragic end of poor old Gabe. I walked past them, my work boots echoing on the linoleum floor. I sat down at the defendant's table next to Peterson. I didn't look at them again. I looked at the empty judge's bench. They had built their entire case on a lie. That I was weak. That I was confused. That I was forgetful. They had no idea that I remembered everything. The bailiff stepped forward. All rise. The performance was about to begin. Their lawyer, the one with the suit that was too shiny, stood up. The plaintiffs call Nicole Hayes to the stand. The entire courtroom watched her. She moved as if she were walking on glass. Her steps were slow, her head bowed. She held that ridiculous lace handkerchief in one hand. She looked like the perfect image of a grieving daughter forced to do something terrible but necessary. She was a professional. This was her Super Bowl. She took the oath, her voice a soft, trembling whisper. I do. Her lawyer, a man named Snyder, approached her with a look of profound paternal sympathy. Mrs. Hayes, he said, his voice dripping with compassion. I know this is incredibly difficult for you. Can you please tell the court in your own words about your relationship with your father-in-law? Nicole looked at me. She actually looked right at me, her eyes brimming with what a stranger would call sadness. I knew what it was. It was triumph. Gabe, Dad. She began, her voice cracking perfectly on the word Dad. He's the kindest man I've ever known. When I married Matt, he welcomed me. He is my father. She paused. Dab, dab, dab with the handkerchief. But over the last year, especially since Alice passed, he's changed. Snyder prompted her gently. Changed how, Mrs. Hayes? He's just not there anymore, she whispered as if the admission pained her. He's confused. He's so forgetful. And he's a danger to himself. I gripped the edge of the defendant's table. Peterson put a hand on my arm, a silent wait. A danger? Snyder asked, his brow furrowed in concern. Those are strong words. Can you give the court an example? Oh, God, she said, closing her eyes as if reliving a trauma. Last month, Matt and I, we always check on him. We try to. He gets so agitated. When we do, but we worry. We went over and the house was cold, and it smelled of gas. She was lying. A complete, total fabrication. My stove is electric. He had turned on the gas stove, the burner, but not the flame, she sobbed. He was just sitting in his chair in the living room reading the paper. The entire kitchen was filling with gas. If we hadn't gotten there, if we hadn't... She broke down, a quiet, theatrical sob into her handkerchief. Matt at his table put his head in his hands, playing his part. The traumatized son. That's horrifying, Snyder said, letting the image hang in the air for the jury. And has there been anything else? He gets lost, she said, her voice small. He's lived in this town for 45 years. But last week, he went to the Roundup Cafe, a place he's been to 1,000 times, and he called Matt. He was crying. He was disoriented. He said he didn't know where he was. He didn't know how to get home. The diner. She was twisting it. She was twisting the day they turned their backs on me into proof of my insanity. The audacity was breathtaking. So, Snyder said, pacing, he's forgetful. He's a danger to himself. Now, let's talk about this lawsuit. Your petition claims he made a financial promise to you. Can you explain that? Oh, it wasn't about a house, she said, shaking her head, as if the very idea was distasteful. It was about his words, his and Alice's. For years, they always told Matt, we're saving this for you. We're building this for you. When we're gone, the family will be taken care of. She looked at the judge, her eyes wide and sincere. Your Honor, Gabe promised us. He promised he would help us. He promised he would invest in us. We trusted that promise. It was a family promise. And what happened when you tried to act on that promise? Snyder asked. Nicole's face darkened with a new, different kind of sadness. The sadness of a victim. We We found our dream home, the home we wanted for our future children. We were so excited. We brought him the paperwork. It was just a formality. We thought he'd be happy for us. And was he? She took a sharp, shaky breath. He was a different person. His eyes, they were cold. He accused us. He accused Matt of trying to steal from him. He called me. He called me names I can't repeat in court. Another lie. I hadn't called her anything. I had just said no, but no wasn't dramatic enough for her story. He threw us out, she said, her voice rising in remembered panic. He threw us out of his house. He was violent in his refusal. He wasn't confused anymore. He was mean. That's when we knew. That's when we realized the man we loved, our father, was gone. Replaced by this angry, paranoid stranger. She had done it. She had painted the perfect picture. I wasn't just a forgetful old man. I was now a volatile, angry, paranoid old man, a danger to myself and to others. Snyder let her words hang in the air. He walked back to his table, then turned as if struck by a final noble thought. So, to be absolutely clear, Mrs. Hayes, this petition, this lawsuit, it's not about money, is it? It's not about the $600,000. This was the moment, the climax of her performance. She turned her gaze from her lawyer to the judge. The judge, a woman in her 60s with intelligent, tired eyes, looked back at her unblinking. Nicole's fake tears finally truly welled up and spilled over. Her voice was a masterpiece of broken devotion. Money, Your Honor. How could this possibly be about money? She choked out. We're his family. We love him. We just want to protect him. We just want to get him the help he needs. We want to manage his affairs so he can't hurt himself, so he can live out his years in safety and dignity. And then she went for the kill, the final vicious twist of the knife. And, she said, her voice breaking completely, we want to fulfill his late wife's greatest wish. I felt my blood run cold. Alice, Nicole whispered as if speaking of a saint. Alice always said that her only job in this world was making sure her family was taken care of, that Matt was safe. We're just trying to do what she would have wanted. I closed my eyes. The desecration was complete. She had taken the memory of my wife, the memory of Alice's love and strength, and she had twisted it. She had forged it into a weapon to justify her own bottomless, pathological greed. She had painted Alice, my Alice, as her accomplice. I heard a sniffle from the public gallery. Someone was buying it. I looked at Matt.